Joining me now, as he does every week, is my Sky News colleague, former Labor Minister Graham Richardson. Thanks for your time. What's your take on the voice referendum? Is it doomed, and where did this all begin?
It's looking doomed. I think when you say where did it all begin, I think the whole idea of putting it is where it all began. I'm not sure that Australians have ever warmed to this or are ever likely to. So while I'm a great supporter of Albo's, I don't think he got this one right.
What was his alternative? Because it's obviously been a call that the coalition didn't make to actually go with this method. They started talking about a local voice that would be legislated and then a referendum on recognition, but never got there. So should he have just picked up that path? Was that the sort of easier political road to hoe, if you like?
Yeah, that would have been an easier path. The easiest path would have not been to have done anything. I don't think that Australia is going to be radically changed by whatever happens in the end of this. I think Australia was going along quite nicely, and I think most Australians would agree with me.
Problem is, you've got the gap, as it's called, closing the gap between First Nations people and the rest of Australians. It's been stubbornly wide, and through a whole raft of policies, some of the areas are just not closing at all. So there was going to be pressure to act in some way, and that was going to be more of a factor for a Labor left Prime Minister, wasn't it? Yeah,
but the pressure on this for Labor, certainly, but I think probably in part the Liberals, has been on us for 40 years. This didn't start yesterday. This has been around for decades. And the truth is, of course, that it's a gap that I don't think will ever be properly bridged. I mean, it's just too hard. We've thrown X amount of dollars at it. I mean, incredible amounts of money at it, and made absolutely zip difference. And what does that tell you? It tells you that it's an incredibly difficult problem, and any politician who stands up and says, I know how to fix it, is a liar. All of us can do is hope that the next effort might do better than the last. But fixing it, we are a long, long, long way away from that.
Well, we are a long way from it. I mean, the old adage is hope is not a method. Once First Australians were asked to come up with something, and they did, something had to be followed to some extent. And I guess you go back to that legislation path, that you could have had this referendum in a few years after it was legislated for a voice, and then, that the sky didn't fall in.
Yeah, well, I wish we'd had it years ago. I wish we didn't just keep talking about it, because I think we've doomed it by continuing to talk about it.
Well, there's 4 weeks of you can see the polling on it. There's 4 weeks after the time of Parliament, and then you've got, I guess, what Labor's going to do in the wake of this, if it is a loss, and how they sort of pivot. I guess there's plenty on the table. There's a lot still going on cost of living, and there's a hope that they have the so-called soft landing on the economy. So, for Labor, it's going to be a quick pivot, you'd imagine, and they will be asked, though, Richo, okay, this failed, what are you going to do next? Because you can't say there's a huge problem, this is how to fix it, and that fails to get up, and then say nothing. So that's the other issue for Anthony Albanese.
Well, if I was Albo, I'd simply say I'm working on it, looking into it, doing the mirror impersonation, because there's no fix, and it doesn't matter how much money you spend, there's no fix. So that being the case, I suppose you don't get up and be that negative. You just say, I'm working on it, because in the end, no one has ever been able to fix it, and I still can't see anyone who could.
The other big topic of the fortnight has been Quantus, which has become quite the kerfuffle. Do you think that what this has been is the last couple of 2, 3, 4 weeks, the hardest time for Labor, and probably the time when we've seen ministers, Catherine King, Linda Burney, under the most pressure since this Labor government?
Yeah, this has been a very difficult few weeks. Alan Joyce hasn't made it any easier either for the government, and so I think there's been a struggle trying to get across what would be a sensible line of rhetoric for this. I just don't think that Labor's come up with one yet, and it'll need to. So they ought to be putting some work into that and working hard.